The most dangerous lie you've ever been told is that humans are naturally good. Hobbes observed something that civilized society desperately wants to hide. We are wolves pretending to be sheep. And the moment you stop pretending, the moment you acknowledge the predator within, something terrifying happens. You become impossible to manipulate, impossible to exploit, and impossible to defeat. The civilized delusion. Thomas Hobbes lived through one of history's bloodiest civil wars and witnessed something that most people never want to see. What humans really become when the thin veneer of civilization is stripped away. What he observed wasn't an aberration or a corruption of human nature. It was human nature revealed in its rawest form. In his masterwork Leviathan, Hobbes wrote his most famous and disturbing observation: Homo Homini Lupus. Man is wolf to man. But this wasn't metaphorical poetry. This was empirical observation. Hobbes had watched neighbors turn on neighbors, friends betray friends, and families destroy each other. Not because they were evil, but because they were human. The civilized delusion tells you that these behaviors are aberrations, temporary breakdowns in otherwise good people. But Hobbes understood something darker. These behaviors aren't breakdowns. They're revelations. When the social constraints are removed, when the consequences disappear, when survival is at stake, the wolf within every human being emerges. And here's what disturbs most people about Hobbes' insight. The wolf isn't your corrupted self. The wolf is your authentic self. Everything else, the politeness, the consideration, the self-sacrifice, these are learned behaviors designed to help you survive in a social structure. But they're not who you really are. Think about your own life. In moments of real crisis, real threat, real scarcity, who do you become? When someone threatens what you love, when resources are limited, when you're pushed to your breaking point, what emerges isn't corruption, it's truth. The person who cuts in line when they're desperate, the friend who lies to save themselves, the colleague who throws you under the bus to protect their position, the family member who fights viciously over inheritance. These aren't bad people having bad moments. These are people whose true nature is temporarily visible. The psychology of predation. Hobbes understood that predation isn't just physical. In human society, it's primarily psychological. The wolf within you isn't seeking to literally devour others. It's seeking to dominate, to control, to secure resources and advantages, often at others' expense. Watch any social interaction carefully, and you'll see what Hobbes meant. The conversation isn't just about information exchange. It's about status negotiation. Who speaks more? Who interrupts? Who gets their preferences acknowledged? Who compromises and who gets their way? These are predatory dynamics disguised as civilized behavior. The person who always steers conversations back to themselves is psychologically feeding. The individual who gives advice when none was asked is establishing dominance. The colleague who takes credit for group work is claiming territory. The friend who only calls when they need something is hunting. But here's what makes this so insidious. We've been taught to see these behaviors as character flaws rather than expressions of natural predatory instincts. So we judge them morally instead of understanding them strategically. Hobbes would tell you that the person who doesn't recognize these predatory patterns in themselves and others isn't morally superior. They're just naive prey. They're sheep who refuse to acknowledge that they live among wolves, and that refusal makes them easy targets. The most psychologically predatory people often appear the most civilized. They've learned to use social conventions as hunting tools. They use politeness to disarm you, kindness to create obligation, and social pressure to manipulate your compliance. They've weaponized civilization itself. The state of nature in modern life. Hobbes described the state of nature, life before social contracts and governments, as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. But he also understood something that most people miss. We never actually left the state of nature. We just developed more sophisticated ways of living in it. Your workplace is a state of nature with HR policies. Your social circle is a state of nature with etiquette rules. Your family is a state of nature with love rhetoric. The fundamental dynamic remains the same: competition for limited resources, attention, recognition, advancement, security, love. The difference is that modern predation is camouflaged. Instead of clubs and territories, we have performance reviews and social hierarchies. Instead of direct physical competition, we have subtle psychological warfare. Instead of obvious dominance displays, we have passive-aggressive manipulation and social positioning. But make no mistake, the war of all against all is still happening. It's happening in your office when colleagues smile while undermining each other. It's happening in your friend group when people gossip and form alliances. It's happening in your family when members compete for attention, inheritance, or approval. The people who succeed in these environments aren't the nicest or the most moral. They're the ones who understand the predatory dynamics and know how to navigate them strategically. They've accepted their wolf nature and learned to use it intelligently. Meanwhile, the people who insist on seeing the world through the lens of fairness, reciprocity, and good faith get devoured. Not because they're bad people, but because they're playing by sheep rules in a wolf world. The social contract as mutual predation. Hobbes' most brilliant insight was understanding why civilization exists at all. It's not because humans are naturally cooperative. It's because mutual predation becomes self-destructive when everyone does it openly. So we created social contracts, agreements to limit our predatory behavior in exchange for others limiting theirs. But here's the crucial point that most people miss. The social contract doesn't eliminate predation. It just regulates it. It creates rules about how to compete, not agreements to stop competing. Marriage is a social contract that regulates sexual competition. Employment is a social contract that regulates economic competition. Democracy is a social contract that regulates political competition. But the competition never stops, it just becomes more sophisticated. The most successful people understand this. They play within the rules, but they're still playing to win. They honor the social contract while maximizing their advantage within it. They're civilized wolves. The least successful people misunderstand the social contract as an agreement to stop being competitive entirely. They think following the rules means everyone else will be fair, that being good means others will be good to them, that honoring agreements means others will honor them back. But that's not how social contracts work. They're mutual restraint agreements designed to prevent all-out war, not mutual cooperation agreements designed to eliminate competition. The power of acknowledged predation. Here's where Hobbes' insight becomes practically useful. When you acknowledge your predatory nature consciously, you can deploy it strategically rather than having it operate unconsciously and destructively. The person who denies their competitive instincts doesn't become non-competitive. They become unconsciously competitive. They undermine others while telling themselves they're being helpful. They manipulate while believing they're being considerate. They dominate while thinking they're being collaborative. This unconscious predation is often more destructive than conscious predation because it can't be negotiated with, reasoned with, or predicted. The unconscious predator doesn't even know they're hunting. But when you acknowledge your wolf nature, several things happen. First, you stop being surprised by others' predatory behavior. You expect it, recognize it, and can defend against it or work with it strategically. Second, you stop wasting energy on moral outrage when people act in their own interests. You understand that self-interest is natural, not evil. Third, you can make conscious choices about when to compete and when to cooperate, based on strategic considerations rather than moral posturing. Fourth, you become much more effective at achieving your goals because you're not handicapping yourself with naive expectations about others' behavior. Strategic wolfishness versus destructive wolfishness. Hobbes wasn't advocating for cruelty or chaos. He was advocating for conscious acknowledgement of competitive instincts so they could be deployed intelligently rather than destructively. Strategic wolfishness means understanding that life is competitive and positioning yourself to compete effectively. It means protecting your interests, advancing your agenda, and securing your resources, but doing so in ways that don't create unnecessary enemies or destroy the systems you need to operate within. Destructive wolfishness means letting your predatory instincts operate unconsciously, creating chaos and conflict that ultimately serves no one's interests, not even your own. The strategic wolf knows when to show teeth and when to appear harmless. They understand that sometimes cooperation serves their interests better than competition. They can form temporary alliances when beneficial and compete directly when necessary. The destructive wolf creates enemies everywhere, burns bridges unnecessarily, and ultimately isolates themselves in ways that make them vulnerable to coordinated attacks from others. Hobbes understood that the goal isn't to eliminate your wolf nature, it's to civilize it, to make it sophisticated, strategic, and socially sustainable. Reading the pack dynamics. Once you acknowledge your own wolf nature, you develop the ability to read pack dynamics in every social situation. You can identify who the alpha predators are, who the beta competitors are, and who the omega prey are. The alpha predators control resources and set social rules. They don't announce their dominance, they simply exercise it. Others defer to them naturally, seek their approval, and adjust their behavior based on the alpha's preferences. The beta competitors are actively jockeying for position. They challenge the alphas carefully, form coalitions with each other, and position themselves for advancement when opportunities arise. The omega prey focus on avoiding conflict, being helpful, and staying safe. They often don't realize they're in competition at all, which is exactly why they consistently lose. Understanding these dynamics allows you to position yourself strategically. You can choose when to challenge for alpha status, when to form beta alliances, and when to appear as harmless omega while actually pursuing your agenda. Most importantly, you stop taking pack dynamics personally. When someone dominates you, you don't experience it as a moral failing, theirs or yours. You experience it as a strategic situation that requires a strategic response. The liberated wolf. Hobbes' ultimate message wasn't pessimistic, it was liberating. When you stop pretending to be something you're not, when you acknowledge your competitive nature, when you accept that life is fundamentally about strategic positioning for limited resources, you become free to operate effectively within that reality. You stop wasting energy on moral posturing and start investing it in strategic thinking. You stop being surprised by others' self-interested behavior and start anticipating it. You stop handicapping yourself with naive expectations and start playing the game that everyone else is already playing. This doesn't make you cruel or heartless. It makes you realistic and effective. You can still choose to be generous, kind, and cooperative, but you'll do so strategically when it serves your interests or values, rather than compulsively because you're afraid of your own nature. The wolf within you isn't your enemy. It's your survival mechanism, your competitive edge, your strategic intelligence. The people who've learned to acknowledge and civilize their wolf nature don't become monsters. They become leaders. They become the people who get things done, who advance their agendas, who protect what they value, and who refuse to be exploited by others who are playing the game more consciously. The choice isn't between being a wolf or being a sheep. The choice is between being a conscious wolf or an unconscious one, a strategic predator or a destructive one, a civilized competitor or a naive victim. Hobbes would tell you, you're already a wolf. You've always been a wolf. The question is whether you'll keep pretending to be something else, or whether you'll learn to be the kind of wolf that thrives in a world full of other wolves. Remember, in a world where everyone is competing, the person who refuses to acknowledge the competition doesn't become noble, they become prey. The person who accepts their predatory nature and learns to deploy it strategically doesn't become evil, they become effective. The wolf you hide within isn't your shadow self, it's your authentic self. And when you stop hiding it and start civilizing it, you don't become dangerous to the world. You become dangerous to those who would exploit your weakness. The most dangerous predators are the ones who've learned to hunt so skillfully that their prey never realizes they're being hunted. Don't be the prey who never realizes. Be the predator who hunts with such strategic intelligence that everyone benefits from your success.